Hi, everyone. My name is Drake Stutesman, and today I'm talking about symbolic design, the hat form, and the origins of conceptual thinking in the Ice Age. So the hat and its role in the Paleolithic really fits the conference focus, which is the intricate play of the tangible and intangible identities. So I really have one point here, which is that the hat representing the concept of organization today, and for example, I'm giving you the magic hat and the religious hat and the education hat. The magic hat is a cone and the religious hat is a circle and the education hat is a square. We recognize them instantly. You don't need any labels. But the form and the inherent value of the hat are very important, and that's what I'm looking at today. So that hat representing the concept of organization today is the outcome of symbolic thinking. And it evolved 100,000 years ago, and it was represented in geometric forms. The Ice Age hat emerged, a tangible object to represent symbolic thinking and organization. So we typically recognize institutions and their meaning through hats and their geometric forms. There they are, the cone, the circle, the square. There's hundreds of examples, and they do follow these geometric forms. So the hat as a form is one of the first objects to be both a tangible object and an intangible one. And this use remains unbroken today. So a hat objectifies the inexpressible. It is a symbolic form. It's really a visual shorthand, and it is really used to simplify a concept. So I'm taking the example of the crown. As an identifier, it combines a social reality, which is the leader, the human person who puts the crown on their head, the person who lives in the present, who breathes, is organic, and the ineffable concept of leadership, which accompanies the crown, and the symbol of the crown when it is placed on the head of a human being, and then it is passed down typically through generations over time, and it represents really the eternalness. So you have the present, the organic, and you have the eternal. And the crown is something capable of bringing those together. And we don't have to think about it. It's effortless. So the hats typically follow geometric forms that often go unchanged for centuries. So again, cone, circle, square, there's so many examples. And today we still link the hat with symbolism, technology, organization, and skill. The hat is designed to carry that agenda through its geometrically based forms. And this begins in the Paleolithic Ice Age. And here's our beautiful Ice Age hat, which I'm going to talk about. And I'm arguing that it is a new form of organization, which is what was a principle in those Paleolithic centuries. So forms are also often very easily shared. And that is something that I think is quite unique to form, especially in hatware. We do not mind seeing conflicting ideologies or gangs even, it doesn't matter. They can claim a hat or a form, and that seems to be something that we are comfortable with. We can command the form and make it our own. This is very typical among lots of different kinds of hatware. But here are three examples, and they're going to be the ones. The skull cap is going to be something I'm showing you in the Paleolithic. So this is religious menswear. We recognize the Judaic, the Muslim, and the Christian. They're all exactly the same shape. They each stand for a different religion, but they easily share the exact same form, and they do that for centuries, which is quite interesting. So from 30,000 to 28,000 BC, there's the semicircular hat that appears. And I'm going to show you more about these little figurines who wear this semicircular hat. It is part of the advent of symbolic thinking and the appearance of geometric patterns. They follow this, and I'll show you what I mean. So the semicircular hat really is a product of the period prior, 100,000 to 40,000 BCE, and that period is known as the creative explosion. And it is really creative, and it really does explode. So it is also when these geometric forms drawn by humans begin to appear. So the creative explosion, it really is the first rendering by humans. The choices that humans make to make these first renderings out of nature are geometric patterns, and this is around the world. So that's the choice that's done, these line forms. Now, we use these line forms today They're very, very recognizable. And you have the circle, you have the square, you have the oval, you have the triangle, the spiral, you have the cruciform, you have the crosshatch, and many others, the square. We use them, we recognize them, even though these are actually 100,000-year-old versions of them. So this means that abstraction precedes realism and stylization. So the cave wall, the wall paintings of La Chauvet and Lascaux are very, very famous. We've all seen them, and they are fantastic stylized images of realistic animals. And that comes so much later. That is 30,000 BCE. So it's much, 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 much later. So it shows that form is crucial to the beginning of human consciousness. And this is something that's very much understood and put forward by Paleolithic anthropologists. So one of the leading ones is Genevieve von Petchinger, and she says 100,000 years ago, people had fully symbolic minds like our own. Faint evidence of modern thinking appears 120,000 years ago in Africa, and it becomes more apparent 100,000 years ago in a plethora of geometric designs. Suddenly there's an explosion of these designs all over, and these are drawn on walls, they're carved into rocks. Zigzag is a very famous one, as well as crosshatch. Those are really, really early. But suddenly that's what humans are doing. So just want to emphasize modern thinking, in other words, the way we think today, the way our brains are capable of thinking, it appears in this plethora of geometric designs 100,000 years ago. So Hoffaker, John Hoffaker, is also a very leading Paleolithic anthropologist and archaeologist. And so he says it very succinctly: symbols were used to create new forms of organization. And the symbols are these geometric patterns. These are the symbols of that time. And he says also the creative potential of the modern mind, evident in the archaeological record after 100,000 years ago, removed all practical limits to the complexity of technology. Now I'm going to show you some of that technology of that period. But again, I just want to emphasize, here is our hat, and I am saying the hat is one of these new forms of organization, and it comes out of the symbolic era using geometric forms. So the semicircular dominates, and it seems to be an outcome of geometric symbolism. The semicircular hat dominates. There are those hats, and we're going to look at those more closely. And it comes out of geometric symbolism. So around 30,000 BCE, there are many many little women figurines, as they're now called. They used to be called Venus figures, but they're called women figures. And they're very generic. On the left, you can see ones from Siberia, Kostinki, those are 30,000, and the one from Austria, Willendorf, that is 28,000. There are many, many versions, and they come from quite a large range. It's mostly in European and Russia in particular, but other figurines that are comparable have not been found in other places in the world. So they're only about 4 or 5 inches high, and I have to say, when you see a close-up of the dexterity with which this is drawn, it is phenomenal, this ability to sculpt so realistically, but also in such tiny form. They're female, they're naked, they have inwardly pointed toes. You can see that in particular in the middle one. They often have one slightly raised knee, and you can see that if you see the knees are slightly together and one is slightly raised. They have a voluptuous fat body, but they have a flat face without features. They have stick arms that are laid on the breast. You can see that in the Willendorf very clearly. And some wear a skull cap. So that's the question. What is this cap? So just to give you a sense of what the Paleolithic is, it really is 3 million years ago. There's human society of human groupings, and it goes up to the Neolithic, which is around 10,000. It's probably been pushed back further back than that, but that's the basic time. And of course, our history barely begins in the Neolithic, so it shows how small we are within the context of human exploration, human creativity. So the woman of Kostinki, which is the Siberian one, is the top, and you can see she has this form on her head. It's very skull cap-like. She's also naked and voluptuous. And then the Willendorf is 28, 25. She's in Austria. So On the map, you can see Austria is the red dot and Siberia is the red circle. They're very, very far apart, over 3,000 miles, quite a long walk. And they are up to 5,000 years distant in time. But they are so alike in archaeology that they are linked as the Kostenki-Willendorf cultural period. Now that is really interesting in and of itself. How are these figures formed exactly the same, so far apart, and in such long distances in time? Very, very interesting what's going on. So what is the world of these first hats? Well, the world is very, very advanced in science and art and technology, in abstraction and symbols. So you have thread and string and rope made out of plant fibers and needles. You have calendars, quite sophisticated calendars based on lunar cycles that are made to endure. These are carved on bone, typically, and they were passed down from generations, and they chart. You can see in the little dots and these little hooks. These are ways of charting the moon over a period of months and years. So you have musical instruments. There's a flute, that's an Ice Age flute. It looks very much the same as today. And you have the incredible figurative wall paintings that we know so well, highly stylized, incredibly rendered, beautifully executed, really something. So what does this hat mean in this world? It's coming out of just this fountain of creativity, intelligence, thinking beyond the natural world in quite phenomenal ways. And here's some possibilities of what this hat could represent. So the Ice Age hat, now this one I've been looking at, the skull cap form, is now determined not to be hair, but to be a hat. It was really kind of ignored for quite a long time, until the 21st century, really. And then it's now determined to be a hat. And you can see why, because it's a distinct hemline. You can see in both figures they have it. And in the Willendorf figure, it's a tilted hemline. So it really does indicate a hat. So one of the, one thing I want to say about the Willendorf figure is you can really see it in detail here. It is especially realistic. One breast is slightly larger than the other. There are distinct vaginal lips. One knee is fractionally raised. The body weight is very well proportioned. You see, it's really a phenomenal figure. But again, the face is flat. There are no features. And they wear the hat is a semicircular form. So on the right, you can see it in profile. It is a spiral, loops of 7 spirals that starts at the top of the head and spirals all the way around and then ends at the nape of the neck. So one of the things that is speculated is that it is literally a demonstration of expert weaving techniques and the radial stitch, radial meaning it just moves outward. And it's perfectly reasonable because this was a very explosive time of what Elizabeth Barber, prehistoric textile expert, has called the string revolution. And it could easily be something so valuable, so important that it is on the head and it is on a naked figure just to give it even more prominence. So the string revolution needs a little promotion because it's 40,000 BCE. It is the invention of thread, of cord, of string, and rope. And that really revolutionized culture because then it created sewing, nets, tethers, slings, hammocks, ties, knots. All of these obviously radicalizing all the different aspects of any society, the home life, the hunting life. Knots, as you may know, became, certainly they were sacred in ancient societies like Greek and in Egyptian, but also the Incas used them as a very complicated form of communication. So this was really fundamental to culture. We couldn't live without the knot alone and all these others. So another possible is this represents the concept of symbolism. Because you can say to yourself, why does such an expertly rendered realistic body have no face and only a flat plane? It's a very good question. And I would venture to say the obscured face signifies the figure as symbolic and not personhood. And there are very good examples in modern times to show that. So again, this is the concept of symbolism as much as symbolism itself. So it's found in modern times in the crown, the Nigerian ade, as the crown is called. It's the crown worn by the king, and there's an image of him sitting, and he's wearing, the cat is always conical, and it's often has three-dimensional objects on it, but they vary quite considerably in color and different kinds of things, but it's always a cone. And it always has the strings that obscure the face. They hang in front, and they're deliberately there to signify that the crown represents leadership and community and not the man who wears the crown. So again, the obscured face may be there to suggest this is not about personhood. Also in the American Southern Mardi Gras masks, they are there. The reason they have them is to obscure the individual identity as a way to signify that the individual and the community are blended. They are one. They each are the other. So again, very similar. Another possible meaning is a shamanistic meaning. Why is a nude figure in a cold climate wearing a hat? So what is the combination of nude female, erased face, cold climate, and skull cap hat? So possibility here is these combinations of things that seem to not go together, that seem to contradict one another, maybe is there to signify that we are not in worldly order, we are not following the rules of nature, but we are in an otherworldly presence, in a supernatural presence. And one way of conveying that is through things that don't quite fit or seem to be, to ask your mind to think out of the rules of nature and into something else. So the Paleolithic hat, semicircle form, like a skull cap. Again, I want to bring you back to the idea of symbols were used to create new forms of organization. And indeed, I think the hat is definitely one of those symbols, an object created as a symbol, as were these graphic designs. Now this graphic design has become 3D. The circle carved in the wall is now a sphere on the head. And the head, of course, is a wonderful place to place something because it's so vibrant. You can't live without it. You can, all your senses come out of it. You feel all sorts of emotions through it. And it's a place of communication. It's a place that we would always center on, and we still do. So the hat, I would say, is a distinct form that represents the concept of organization, because we organize so much under the aegis of hat already now. And this started out of the geometry, then it goes to the 3D. This places hat in the category of a critical object of design. And the hat represents the thinking process, the process of conceptualizing out of this incredibly rich period of creative explosion, the thinking process of conceptual ideas, as well as the conceptual idea itself. Quite wonderful. So the invention of symbolism is concurrent with the first forms, and those first forms are lines, single lines that form geometric patterns. And the importance of lines is the first symbolic manifestation. And the hat seems to be part of this opening of the mind. And all of this is crucial to the beginning of human consciousness. These lines that create these patterns that we still use, they are crucial. So my final connection is the 30,000-year-old skull cap may have been used to render form to signify symbolic thinking. This symbolic transformation conveys identity in many hat forms. We use it constantly, every day, all day long. We have the crown, the ball cap, the turban, the magic hat, all of these and millions of others. You wear that and the person is transformed. And they are transformed and part of a community in which that transformation is flexible, allowed, and manifested in a way that allows the person to move beyond themselves and to be part of a community that also is able to move beyond themselves. So that's all. Thank you.